Hey, security peeps, we are live on this Friday morning once again with our awesome co-team here while we break LinkedIn with Breaking Into Cybersecurity and the Hacker Valley Studio team. I am Renee Small, and I'm excited to be here. As you all know, or if you don't, my company is Cyberhuman Capital, and I mostly work on focusing on hiring wonderful cybersecurity professionals like my three dear friends right here. And I will kick it over to my Chris to be introduced.
Hi. This Chris?
Yes, my Chris.
I'm Christophe Foulon, Renee's co-host on Breaking Into Cybersecurity and a senior security consultant at GRIM. And I just like helping people break into the industry and improve their overall career.
Excellent.
Nice. My Chris.
What's going on, everybody? Chris Cochran from Hacker Valley Studio. Glad to be here. We do this every Friday. Make sure you put your questions down wherever you're watching this. We answer them. Also a practitioner at Netflix on the cybersecurity team. Love doing this stuff. Love reaching out and producing content for everybody. So yeah, over to Myron.
I think everybody said it best. You know, we're all podcast hosts here, part of Hacker Valley Studio, and all about uncovering the human element behind our practitioners.
Excellent. So today we are going to two things. I want to reiterate what Chris Cochran said. Please put your questions in the chat. We like to make this interactive and fun. Although the four of us can have a ball by ourselves, we want you we want you included as well.
Be a part.
Be a part of the conversation. And then secondly, our topic for today is really going to be focused on, it's a check-in. So it's kind of like checking in with each other. This is our fourth edition now. I think we've been doing this for
episode 4.
It's been a month already?
It's been a month already.
Wow. Oh my gosh, this time warp.
It's crazy. So it's been a month that we've been doing this. And so we're doing a check-in. And then we're also, Chris Foulon, said that we should focus on talking about what we're learning while we're in this coronavirus world, this new virtual world that we're in. So, Chris, you want to take it away since this is your topic of the day?
Oh, great. Sure, take it away. I'm finding new ways to learn new topics, both for work and at home. So, for example, I needed a bike to get out of the house and to not go crazy. So I've been reading up about mountain bikes, about local trails, about things like that to keep me physically active, as well as working on my health. At work, I'm working on improving my project engagement skills as a PM. So I've been reading this, and while not the most current book, it does have a lot of helpful tips in there that you can adjust to the new normal, because of course this was written in a time where everyone was on site and you were engaged with your clients directly. So now you just have to find new ways to do that. And those are some of the things that I'm working on. Chris, what about you?
So I've been working on a couple things. I've been trying to figure out new ways of staying in shape. Obviously, you know, we can't get to the gym as much as we were before, but, you know, I've been doing my thing. I've been alternating between doing this swing workout. I've really fallen in love with kettlebells. For those of you that are now searching for kettlebells to do your workouts, they're all gone, every single one of them, because I need to move up in weight. But I cannot find a kettlebell. It's terrible. So I've just been up in the reps and up in the duration of the workout, also doing push-up workouts and stuff like that, but keeping it minimal. You know, I'm a dad with 3 kids and a bunch of people in the house, so don't have a ton of time on top of doing the podcast and my full-time job. One thing I did want to mention for folks out there is that Ron and I, we were actually selected as finalists for the EU Blogger Awards. Super pumped. This is the first potential award for Hacker Valley Studio. And so there's a link floating around somewhere. We'll put it in the chat to make sure that people can get to it to go ahead and vote. So please give us a vote. But yeah, I've really been focused on how do we make our podcast better. So better equipment. Ron and I have been doing our research. How do we, reach more people? How do we engage with more people? How do we produce better content? How do we get better guests? Like, it's been kind of an obsession. I think somebody needs to check in on me because I just can't stop. But yeah, so just fitness, doing my work, being a good dad, being a good husband, and doing the best podcasting that I can.
Renee, before Ron goes ahead, I think we need to learn some of their podcasting skills because we're slacking.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are amazing. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
fantastic.
I was going to say, congratulations, because you do such a phenomenal job. I mean, I was so impressed even when you first started. I think you and I chatted. Chris, you were on Breaking Into Cybersecurity like 6 months ago or 8 months ago, a while ago when you first started. And I was so impressed by the whole podcast studio and everything. I'm like, wow, this is really professional.
Thank you
on
so
top
much.
of the equipment and everything else and the content you put out and just the diversity of content. Like, I just love all of the different ways you all talk about different topics. And I really, fingers crossed, everybody get out there and vote. I'm voting for
Please.
For these guys because y'all are pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Sure,
That's always great to hear.
What are you learning about?
For me, it's the same thing. I'm learning about kind of outside of the things that Chris just talked about. I am also diving deep on kind of reverse engineering processes. So how do we make our podcasts higher in the ranking? There's, not necessarily formulas for it, but there are certain things that people do. So kind of taking their strategy, seeing how we can implement it and reverse engineer that process. But outside of that, I've also been learning about relationships, like how to kind of be more of a thoughtful person in any type of relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic, or even with my parents. Really been doubling down on that because now is the time. Life is precious. We see that with everything that's going on. So why not learn and develop that skill even more? So I've been really taking care of myself, my skill set, and also checking in on my loved ones every chance I get.
That's fantastic. So what have I been up to?
What have you been up to?
I have been trying to stay sane, learning about how to get a little bit of knowledge into these kids' heads while the moms of the world and dads, homeschool. So that has been a learning experience and process. And like I think I've said it on every podcast, God bless the teachers of America and the world.
Absolutely.
I don't know how they're doing it on a day-to-day basis. So that's one area. And then what I have learned, and I don't know, this might be a bad thing. It's good, but it's bad. I've learned how to mix some really great drinks. So the drink game has definitely gone up. I've been making lemon martini, lemon drop martinis, all types of martinis. French martini is perfected. Now I'm off to the Moscow Mule. So I'm staying in the vodka, staying in that space.
Yeah.
I've increased the level of the types of vodka that I've been using. So yeah, it's bad, but it's yummy.
I know no one's driving out there, but drink responsibly.
Tweet responsibly when you're drinking.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hence why I haven't been making many comments on LinkedIn or Twitter. Just keep it all together.
What's been the drink of choice? World. You said martinis?
What I really like, I started the month off with martinis, but then I started doing Moscow Mules without that cup that it comes in.
The metal cup.
So, right, the metal cup. So the ginger beer is just so delicious.
It is.
That's the thing. That's the one.
Okay. One of the things that I did want to mention was Andrew Miller, as kind of was the one that sparked this conversation today, because he shared, after listening to some of our podcasts, some helpful links for those who are also looking to up their skills game. And he shared some links for some Splunk courses, for some ServiceNow courses, and for some Scrum fundamental courses that we can go ahead and share in the comment section. But that's really what got this started. So what are some of the other ways that Chris, like for example, yourself, like what technologies are you looking to focus on that would help you improve your role on a day-to-day basis?
You're talking from a work perspective?
Yes.
Yeah, so from a work perspective, we're doing a lot of orchestration. That's Ron's go-to field, because we're in a space where we have a lot of work to do, and we have technologies, and we need to make sure those technologies are talking to each other and doing a lot of the work that we don't necessarily have the time to do, or if we had the time to do it, our efforts would be best suited to do other things. So looking at how do we orchestrate. So for those of you that don't know, Netflix actually just open sourced a tool we call Dispatch, and that's for incident response. And it's an amazing tool built by Mark Villanova and Forrest, and also Kevin Gilson. Just check it out. It's a fantastic tool. It's up on GitHub and also on our open source page. But yeah, so that's the type of technology that we're looking at now.
And what about yourself, Ron?
For me, I work with a lot of individuals that code all day, and we kind of engineer things to talk to each other, kind of like Chris was saying, but it's mainly through programming. So when I'm looking at tools, I'm looking at a lot of productivity tools. I'm looking at tools that can enable me to be more productive with my customers or even my team. So the tools that I've been looking at are, and also that we've even onboarded with the podcast, is a tool called Calendly. Calendly allows people to look at my calendar and schedule time with me. So even if like someone random were to want to sync up with me and just chat about something specific or generic, I would send them my Calendly. Like, take the headache of scheduling off of myself, but allow me and the individual or me and the team to still have an opportunity to sync up. I'm also looking at some note-taking apps too. There's this app called Notion that I've been using a lot. Notion is a great tool for note-taking. You can take your notes in Markdown, but when you copy and paste it to a Word or Google Doc, it keeps the formatting. So you could easily take your notes from Notion to GitHub or Notion to Google Docs. So just having that agility as an architect is very important for me and my team.
Yeah, I've been using Buffer to help post relevant articles, because I don't always have the time in the middle of the day to check everything that's happening and to post all the time. So I use Buffer because I find useful articles that I do want to share, but I don't want to share 10 of them all at once. So I kind of use that as a way to spread out the posts and still get the information out for people.
Tell us a little bit about Buffer, because we were definitely interested in seeing what applications we could use it for on our end. How does it work? Number one, is it free? Number two, how does it actually pick the feeds that you want to submit, or the articles you want to submit? Is it based on RSS or?
Yeah, so yes, there are free options. So unlike, say, the other ones like Hootsuite or something like that you have to pay for, there's a free option of Buffer that allows you to post to up to 3 channels and buffer up to 10 posts. So there's a plugin that you can use in your browser, or you can manually type in the content in their web portal, and you can add links and pictures. The one thing that it doesn't allow you to do is tag any individuals. So that's the one downside. Now, about getting content to there, I use another tool called Feedly, where I would connect all my RSS feeds. So instead of going to 100 different sites to find useful articles, on a daily basis, I would check my Feedly collection. and I populated that from an article that I do have on my LinkedIn profile with over 100 different information security feeds that you can look at yourself. And Feedly kind of aggregates those, and I can look at see what's trending, see what the headlines are, and if I see something that's interesting, then I use the plugin in Firefox to post that straight to Buffer.
I gotta ask because I'm always curious. I look at a lot of information a day, and I think I'm overwhelming myself. How are you looking at 100 feeds and making sense of it all, and kind of prioritizing what you're looking at and how long you're looking at it for?
Well, there you go. So, because I'm not in a threat intelligence role, I'm I'm focused on things that are interesting to me. So I do have separate categories. So some are for business, some are for government areas, some are for mergers and acquisitions, some for information security, some for data breaches. So I kind of have those different categories. And then I kind of go through, and Feedly just gives me like the headline and the first couple sentences within that article. And if it strikes my interest, I'll go ahead and click on it. If not, I'll let it pass by. But it's something that I do maybe during a couple minutes of downtime, but I wouldn't spend too much time on it for myself, but I want to see what's happening out there. I think one of the things during this crisis that some people do is they overload on news, they overload on CNN or whatever news channel they go to, and then they build up anxiety around what's happening. I don't want to do that. So I try to limit my ingestion of pandemic-related information, but I still want to get relevant information. So I do go directly to things like the World Health Organization, as well as the CDC and Johns Hopkins. I kind of keep those three areas for updates. And then for my information security feeds, I have a bunch of different ones.
Chris is pretty fantastic about taking all of that data and being able to parse it in so many different ways. And it's one of the things that is awesome about what he does and how he provides that information. And I think it's so helpful to people, especially as they try to break into the industry, because they're looking for just all types of data and info. And by him sharing some of those blogs and just data, just news feeds and things like that, it's really, really helpful. I was going to add in another thing that I'm working on is, building out a talent acquisition operations guide and streamlining processes when it comes to that. So one of the things that I'm doing is helping a company really build out their TA team, or just the operations as a whole. And that is just piecing that, putting it all together is really a lot of fun. It's super interesting. And for companies that, most companies that I've worked in have been really, really large, and they have these big machines. And, we talk about things like applicant tracking systems and getting lost in there and all that stuff. So it's really cool to kind of learn and help build something from the ground up. It's a lot of fun.
Talking about learning new systems, question for Chris and Ron when he comes back. Chris, what are some of the ways that you future-proof your career for what's coming down the pike? Not just focused on the here and now, but how do you prepare yourself for what's to come?
Yeah, so a lot like you were explaining earlier is how do you learn about learning, or learn how to learn better, which is the concept of meta learning that we talked about last week. So being able to, focus on, what are the most efficient ways to learn something new and learn something new quickly is something that I constantly work on. I think you can't be good enough in that area. I think that's something you always have to work on, especially, as you get older, making sure you have that neuroplasticity to continue to keep your mind sharp. So yeah, that's what I try to do is to keep that axe as sharp as possible.
And how do you decide what to learn on to keep yourself relevant? Like, for example, within your role, how do you know what the next skill is within threat intelligence, or what the next technology is that's coming down the pike, so that you can test it out ahead of time? Yep. And you just don't learn about it once it becomes popular?
Yeah, so I mean, I really keep an ear out, with my friends, with my, my network, because they're going to figure out things, and they're going to get early warnings of the next emerging, new hotness in technology. And so whenever they say, hey, you need to definitely check this out, that's what I do. I give it a shot. Maybe you bring it in for a POC and see if it fits, my needs.
Renee, what about yourself? How do you keep up with any of the changes in the recruiting world, or in helping companies ensure that they keep up with the changes?
No, that's really a couple of things that I do is, and the reason why I have our little recruiter podcast on Wednesdays, Super Recruiters, is I definitely like to connect with peers and see what is happening in different companies and the different projects that they're working on, and really understanding what the market is bearing, because I could be seeing one thing. I know a couple months ago, we were all kind of seeing the same things and trends. And so asking them about, hey, what is it that you're seeing? This is what I'm seeing, how quickly people are responding, how much senior leadership is, how long senior leadership is taking to hire people. Another resource that I use is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has from a recruiting perspective, they have some really, really amazing data, since it's probably like the biggest job, quote unquote, job board at this point. And they really, really kind of hone in on when people are hired and when people are not. So like this in the middle right now is typically hiring super busy season. So January, February, March, like Q1 and the beginning of Q2 is when people typically move around. And there's a lot of hiring activity that typically goes on. There's actually still really a lot of hiring activity going on. It's just in specific roles and specific industries. So we talk about that. We share, I look at that data to see what's happening in the industry, so that I could take stuff back to, the different leaders and partners and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what, is happening across the country, across the world, year over year, like what was happening last year in comparison to this year. DICE also puts out they put out a second white paper recently that I was reading around, technology professionals and how the market is still, people are getting snapped up, people are getting hired. I've been personally talking to people who they're like, sorry, I just got 3 offers and I took one, so it is happening, and it's definitely a lot of doom and gloom, to your point, to what you were saying, Chris, in terms of the news and things like that. But there is hiring happening right now, especially in this industry. If you have technology, the skills that you all have, there are droves of opportunities out there. So those are some of the places. LinkedIn, DICE is good for this kind of data, and then talking to my peers.
Yeah. Speaking about resources, we have a comment from Clifford Stokes Jr. He said, please create a list of these books. I just finished the book that Ronald mentioned on an earlier one. One thing I did want to mention is we definitely need to get a book list together, because I'm sure we could fill it up. I know, Chris, you have one already, but let's make a new one just off of these lives. One book I wanted to mention, and it's really, really applicable to podcasting. So you guys might want to read it. It's Out on the Wire. This was actually a book recommendation from Jack Rhysider when we had him on our podcast. Jack, for those of you that don't know, Jack Rhysider is the host and producer of Darknet Diaries, which is a phenomenal podcast. He's amazing. He is like a prodigy when it comes to podcasting. But what it does is it teaches you basically how to tell a story. How do you make stories interesting? And cybersecurity, I think cybersecurity is all about stories, right? How do you convey your value to the C-suite? How do you convey your value to the board? Whether you're doing intelligence, whether you're doing vulnerability management, hunting, compliance, all of these things are all about stories. So being able to tell a really good story is super important. So again, that book is Out on the Wire. Definitely check it out, especially if you're thinking about doing a podcast, because it's super good resource.
We need to read that.
One of the collections of books talking about like finding yourself and finding new things to do during this time. So whether you want to spring off into a side project or something like that, it's from an author called Dory Clark. She's written several books. The three that I would recommend is Stand Out, and that one could be within your career, within your current role, to stand out and show your value. Reinventing You, which is one kind of geared towards your transition if you're looking to do something else. And then the third one is your entrepreneurial you. And that is if you're looking to branch out and do something new. And what I like about Dory's work is that it's a simple read, not too long, but really good advice and things that you can incorporate without too much effort. And I think resistance is the biggest stop to anyone changing anything. So those little things are always handy.
Cool. So Manisha wants to know, can you suggest any advice? I'm applying for information security jobs in this global pandemic and it's too slow. So I'll take that one, Manisha. It is going to be a slower process just overall. I think because we're dealing in a pandemic, like you think about there's multiple different layers in a standard regular environment. You know, there tends to be usually hiring cybersecurity professionals as a whole takes 90 days plus. Some companies are much faster, but on average, that's probably the time span, taking about 3 months in general. So you throw on top of that people who are dealing with their day jobs and then trying to hire. And then, you know, if you have children or elderly or whoever else you're taking care of, just being in the middle of this pandemic is just going to put another layer of time on getting through to candidates and the process overall. So be patient if you're not hearing back. You know, follow up with especially the top companies that you're interested in or the top roles. If you have, you know, 5 to 10 top roles, connect with the leadership of those roles on LinkedIn and share why you would be a good fit. So, you know, when it comes to just applying to opportunities, I don't know if you're applying through the company's website or however you're doing it, but the recommendation is always to connect with leaders through LinkedIn, letting them know that you have applied and you're interested, and you know, one reason why you're awesome and why you would be a good fit for them in their role. So does anyone else want to add anything about that?
I would just echo what you said, right? Leverage your network, reach out to the leaders that are behind the hiring managers that are looking for the individuals that they're trying to hire today. And people are pretty loud that are still hiring. So a great example is Netflix. I'm sure that might not be the best place to start out in your cybersecurity career, just because I know they mainly hire senior, but they're still blasting on LinkedIn about the fact that they're hiring security engineers. So I think if you look at those types of posts, reach out to the people behind hiring the individual, you'll have a lot of success, especially in the slower market.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
We got another question. Shilpa says, are there any good online sources to keep yourself updated aside from your network? So it really depends on what you're looking for. One resource that I really love is bleepingcomputer.com. They really do a good job of getting the stories up there really quickly. Another place is podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. The Cyberwire is a good daily podcast you can listen to. Plenty of podcasts out there, especially if you're wanting to get into security and hear other stories about getting into security. Breaking Into Cybersecurity, I think, is a perfect resource. So yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for. Also use things like Twitter, and follow researchers if you're looking for threat stuff. If you're looking for, different vendors, follow different vendors. It really depends on what you're looking for. Anybody else?
I would also say what Chris said earlier, Feedly. That's been one of the ways that I've really stayed afloat. You can add a feed to it. If you want to remember it, you can remember it and check on it constantly, or you can just forget about it. So
I might have gone out.
Yeah.
I have a question, but it is he said it's not related to this, but we can make it relatable. It's Hubert DeCruz. He's in HR. He wants to know if updating his resume. He's updating his resume. Do I think it would help if a tech writer reviewed his resume? If yes, what would be the best place to find such a writer? And then he has a decade of experience in HR. And should he include these experiences in the resume? So Hubert, I'm going to answer your question, and it'll relate to other people's resume related questions since we get those quite often. Danny Barker is awesome with resumes. So that's number one. So shout her out. I'll tag her in here. If your resume is not, so this is kind of the barometer when getting resumes done. If you are getting callbacks, or if your resume is getting chosen and you can get it in through applicant tracking systems, and managers are calling you, or HR and recruiters are calling you back, then your resume should be pretty good because it's hitting all the keywords, it's aligning to the different opportunities that you're applying to. If you are putting if you're, connecting, applying, and you're putting your resume out there and it's not getting any type of feedback, then yes, I would definitely have someone review it to ensure that it aligns to the types of positions that you're applying for. When it comes to, depending on the type of company, HR is a little bit trickier right now. A lot of companies are putting roles on hold. So on the one hand, you have like technology folks that are really, really getting picked up and getting into different opportunities. And then on the other hand, you'll have like HR, which tends to, if companies are freezing positions, and if a company is laying people off, then if you're in recruiting, for example, that, who are you recruiting? So you're likely going to be looking for opportunities in other companies. So you kind of, again, want to target companies that are looking and are hiring, and getting a resume that really aligns to whatever it is that they're looking for, that you're an expert in, is a good way to go. So I think what tends to happen is people have very generic resumes, and they try to be like everything to everyone, and it doesn't work that way. You have to kind of get very, very specific, especially during times like this when you're going to have you may have an influx of competition. You definitely want your resume literally speaking to the job description, so that when the manager sees it, he or she is like, oh my God, this person is perfect. Like they want to jump all over you, or they want to jump all over your resume because your resume really, really looks like what it is that they want.
I had two situations that happened last week that were right in line with this. One of it was one of the situations was a newer entrant into the market. They had listened to our podcast, but then they connected with me and then directly sent me their resume without any context, without trying to say what they were looking for. Were they looking for me to refer them to a role, to give them advice? Like, what exactly were they looking for? And then the other one was a more senior individual that same thing, reached out to me looking for advice, but when they shared their resume, it was like very dense. And I think depending on your area of experience, when you're in senior leadership, your resume should be more focused on results. Like, how did you help the business? What problems did you solve? And then what were some of those numbers in regards to solving those problems? Whereas if you're more junior in your career, focus on what are your skill sets and how can you be helpful to solving that hiring manager's problems? Because depending on where you are in your career, you're being brought in for a different task within the role, within the company. Would you say that's correct, Chris?
Yeah, I would say that's correct. One thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad that someone actually just piped on to ask this question, because this is the second time I've been asked this in a 12-hour period. Lynette Young said, I'm a recent cybersecurity graduate studying for my Security Plus certification. What do I need to do to get the ball rolling? I've sent out over 200 resumes, but I'm constantly getting rejected for not enough experience. One thing that I like to tell people is do your own project so you can actually have some experience, even if you're not getting paid for that experience. So, build your own, perhaps you can build your own network in your house, and then you can, onboard your own SIM. There's a free version of Splunk that you can start playing around with. If you can, and then use that project as a part of your resume. Even though you're not getting paid for it, it still shows that you have the requisite skills to do some of at least the initial things from a cybersecurity perspective. But I'd love to hear from other folks. How do you folks that are just coming out of school actually get a job in cybersecurity with just a graduate degree?
Yeah, I definitely recommend that to the individuals that I've coached. Is as a hiring manager, I want to see some of the things that you've done. So whether it's been in your internship, on the side, whether you have a GitHub repo or you have a blog. So if you're looking to be a consultant, pick a topic of the week and then write a blog dissecting your point of view on that topic, how it could have been handled better or improvements that could have been made, sharing your point of view so that if the hiring manager sees that blog, because it might be linked on your LinkedIn profile, and they check out your LinkedIn profile and they see that type of work, then they can have a better understanding as to your thought process and the value that you bring, even though you might not have had experience in a role before.
I would echo everything that they said. Both Chris's. No, in regards to the self-directed projects, that is the first thing that I tell people if they have a blank resume, because again, managers want to see that you are that you do have experience, a little bit of experience, and not expecting for you to, if you just got into the industry, to have a ton of experience. But they are expecting that you have done some due diligence and that you're out there doing self-directed projects. Also, you may not even have to do an additional project. You may just have to pull from what you did either in grad school or undergrad or what have you, because I'm hoping and I've heard and learned that those projects are what are in your coursework. So if you have related coursework, especially the ones that really, really excited you, if there's projects that you worked on that made you go to sleep, okay, you don't want to put that up there to talk about it. But if there are projects that you worked on and you were really excited about it, put them on there. Talk about the tools that you use. Literally go step by step into what you did. And then look at other job descriptions. Another like cheat sheet that I tell people to do all the time, especially when you're looking at like cybersecurity analyst entry-level positions. If you start looking at, especially this young lady that applied to 200 positions, there's probably groups of positions that look similar. And those positions that look similar, the ones that you're most interested in, I would take like the first 2 to 3 bullets out of each position and kind of align them, highlight them, you'll start to see a pattern. There's likely going to be roles that are all the same. So for example, I don't know how many SOC analysts are floating around there, out there, but if you're trying to get into, entry-level SOC role and it's asking for, SIM, just certain keywords, and then the types of SIMs that you've worked with or worked on. If you're in a grad program or an undergrad program, you likely have a little bit, you have touched these things, you've done this stuff already. So if you keep seeing that over and over and over again, but your resume doesn't have it, then you're pretty much digging yourself out of the process. So when people talk about keywords, they talk about, what it is to look for. It's really kind of like when Chris and Ron said earlier, we're reverse engineering how to make Hacker Valley Studio the best podcast. It's the same thing. It's reverse engineering. How do you get your resume in front of the hiring manager so that you can be the one that's chosen to come in and talk about your skills? So it's a very, very, I used to have a program called Resume in Reverse. So you just take the job descriptions, you get copy paste. I'm a firm believer, copy paste. Don't put stuff up there that you don't know. You want to be able to talk to these things. But if you keep seeing it over and over and over again, and you're like, oh my God, I've done that. Why are people not calling me? It's because it's not being spelled out in your resume.
Mm-hmm. So. Wow, that's perfect.
So true.
Yeah.
Perfect advice. Got another question, and I think this is perfect for Ron. Ashish asks, I'm looking forward to switch my career over to a security solutions architect. What certifications and areas should I focus on moving forward?
That is a great question. Solutions architect, that's typically a term that means you're working at a vendor or some type of service provider, security service provider. So there's a lot that you'll need to be good at. There's a lot that you'll need to kind of understand, but I think understanding communication is going to be a big aspect in that, just because solutions architect are typically in front of customers or teams or stakeholders providing solutions of some sort. So I would say really make sure that your project management skills are up to snuff. The technical skills are always great, but your job as a solutions architect is to create a solution. So you'll need to be well versed in many things, but I think you'll need to be organized enough to make sure that your project goes to completion. That's really the most important piece for a solutions architect, is implementing the solution. You have to reach the finish line. I've worked with a lot of teams that follow an agile methodology. I think an agile certification goes a long way. I know it's not really cyber or tech related per se, but that skill it's a life skill, and it's gonna make you successful in any role, especially solutions architect.
Question for both of you. When it comes to training and preparing for new technology, what are your views on like hands-on labs versus videos versus reading material? What's your preferred method of learning?
I gotta go hands-on. I have to. I can't watch a video and know how to do anything because I feel like actually going through the process of doing the thing makes me help better. So for instance, SANS courses are great because they actually have exercises and they have you go through different things that practitioners would do. And so whenever you go to take the test, you'll be able to remember what you were doing in a particular tool and remember what the logs might look like. And then you'll be able to answer the question. But you could memorize what the logs look like just from a picture. But if you actually know how to do it, you just know it so much better.
I think it depends.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to agree. I was going to say hands-on is always the best. I do have a good memory. I've trained it, though. I've trained it over time, so it's gotten better. I do prefer someone to talk at me or me to talk at someone. So one of the better ways that I learn is by telling somebody else what I just learned.
Yep.
So I think if it's not hands-on, teaching it is the best way.
Yeah, I like what you say. You say if you teach it, you get to learn it twice.
Exactly.
I would say learning how you learn best, which I think we talked about this last week. Some people are more, I'm hands-on as well. If I do whatever it is I'm doing and I do it hands-on, I'll remember it so much more than either reading about it, watching a video, or whatever. But to Ron's point, some people are better at talking it through. Some people are better at reading. They can absorb like a ton of information through reading, through watching videos. So the reason why some of these training courses are it's a combination of all of it. It's a combination of the textbook and and the visual and the teacher speaking and, on the hands-on component, is because it's making sure that it touches all the different styles of learning. So.
What do you all think of micro content? I think content is kind of being simplified in lots of ways. Even this live stream, typically maybe something like this would be hours long of content, but now it's just 1 hour. Have you guys found that micro content has helped you get an advance in your career?
Yeah, I think a shining example of micro content would be some place like Cyber IT that has larger concepts broken down into smaller classes. Udemy also has those types of micro content. I personally like them, but like Chris mentioned, I also like doing the thing. So whether you have like a lab at home, machines at home to try these things on, you're using a cyber range, whatever you use to do it, it helps me as well. But kind of the other way that I learn is people talking to me, because I'm an auditory person.
Yeah, totally. So it's a couple comments here. Mary Galloway says, nice plug, Chris, when you plugged the podcast, and to make sure, Chris Cochran, to make sure that everyone votes for you. This was earlier. She's like, nice plug.
Thank you so much.
I know, our friend. I'm like, when is she coming on? We can have her together.
Absolutely.
Jonathan said, good morning. Dylan is making comments as well. Oh, Mary says she's coming on next week. All right. We might have a guest in here.
Buddy.
Ben made some really good comments. He said the read later bookmark feature in Feedly is also killer. Lets you save articles to read when you can and strips out some of the extra junk from the website. So Ben has another point around Weebly. So yeah.
Feedly.
And he also says, what's it called? Feedly.
Feedly, not Weedly.
Feedly. Not Weebly, not Weebly, not Weebly.
Oh, another tip for the Feedly users out there. There's another website called If This Then That. Ooh. If you want to integrate, say, your Feedly with a Slack, and you want to actually automate putting different articles in your Slack, let's say you're doing like a threat intel feed or something like that for folks, you can actually sign up and then have those articles automatically put into your Slack.
I use if then that for home automation.
Yeah.
So if the temperatures drops, switch the AC to go to eco. If the temperature is high, ensure that it's not on eco and turn the temperature on. But that website has so many integrations and so many cool things that you can do.
That's a good point. And I would recommend anyone that is trying to break into cyber, if you're killing some time right now, that's a great thing to learn, because there's a lot of security concepts that you'll need to think about when implementing all this home automation. Like, all right, what should really have access to my doorbell that has a video camera that, is going somewhere? Where is that going? Ask yourself some of those questions and identify what's the best practice for your home security.
Yeah. I would agree. That's like such a project, and it's so needed. Like, if a person, one of the things that's happening right now is that there's so many people out here that are not used to working from home and not used to being in this environment. Many of us, we do this. Chris and I have been doing this for years. I don't know if you two, Chris and Ron, I don't know if you all used to go in office a ton, or if you work half remote, half not. But for people who literally have never or have not worked remotely for a long period of time, it's just like a one-off. The opportunities that are out there for budding cybersecurity professionals to help people just as a whole, that would be such a great project. I know a lot of folks are struggling. I have a couple really good friends that they have not worked from home in the past. They're usually out in the fields, out in, and when I say in the fields, meaning not in the fields, but in the field for them, meaning like working in a hospital, going into a location, and it is completely different, and I keep seeing all little funny the videos, the memes of people who think they're on Zoom or think they're off Zoom, but they're not, and they think, they don't have on any pants and all this stuff, but not in a joking, a bunch of us could probably get up and not have pants, and it's like, it's hilarious, but they thought that nobody saw them. Right. And that's what's crazy about it, so just helping people through that process. Ben also says he wishes he learned in high school how to learn. It's something that we all, I mean, the sooner you learn that kind of stuff, I mean, it's just, you end up taking off. And then Ben says, if you're looking for a project and want to implement something like IFTTT, but self-hosted and open source. So he has a link in here. Ben, super helpful. DevSecOps, there, Ben. Yeah. I have to bring Ben on here too.
Yeah. Similar to what Ron mentioned, is for understanding how things are supposed to work. You can also do that concept with other things as well. So it might not be something technical, but it could be like a process. So you're at work and you're trying to understand, say, how a payment's supposed to happen. If you understand it goes through this system, and then you figure out who's supposed to interact with it, who's not supposed to interact with it. What are the intended actions? What are the possible means of attacking it? Like, that sort of analysis, similar to the trike model, would allow you to understand what is and isn't supposed to happen to a process. And then you can suggest ways to improve the security of that process to your manager, which they might not have asked about, but if you have some extra time on your hands, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, so let's do final rounds. The only thing I would say is, just do your best to get better every day. Do something small every single day when you wake up, and that's going to help keep you sane. That's going to help keep you motivated, and you'll be able to move on from there.
I'd say do something healthy. Keep yourself active. Get some fresh air. Don't watch the news all day. Spend time with your family and spend time with nature.
Yeah, for me, I would also say stay positive. I would say, in this time, it could feel like maybe some things are looking really good or you have some setbacks. Either way, just stay positive, keep moving forward. Everything is going to, be beneficial in the end for you. You're going to reflect and think back about all the great things that have happened. Also, one of the things I wanted to say, Renee, is I'm going to have a question for you next week about what happens if you are working from home all this time and you actually start to enjoy it. How do you kind of find a career or position yourself in your current position to work from home permanently? So that's going to be one of my questions for you next week.
Question. I have tons of answers around that. I have my own philosophy. I think the vast majority of these jobs are going to be remote.
I'm asking
I put an article out. Yeah, always asking for a friend, always. I put an article out last week, I believe, and it talked about CFOs and how right now the average CFO, I think 500 or so CFOs of Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 1000 companies were surveyed, and they said 5% of roles are going to permanently be not typical non-remote roles are going to become remote. And I think any CFO and any board of directors, as they start to look at numbers, especially when it comes to, commercial real estate and things like that, and seeing how efficient people have been, over the past couple months, to me, I cannot see this going back to how it was. So I think there's just going to be more and more remote opportunities as a whole. I mean, we'll jump into it more then because it's 12 o'clock on the East Coast and we all got to jump. But I'll save it for next week. Oh my God, such a good question.
Let's do it next week.
Let's do it next. So my final is to stay positive. There are opportunities out there. I know because I am recruiting for a bunch. And, continue to just stay safe, keep your family close, reach out to folks every day, everything all these phenomenal guys have said already. And that's it. So we will wrap our 4th episode. That's
Yes.
crazy. This is
Fantastic.
like
May the
truly
fourth
just
be
do
with
it.
you.
May the 4th be with you.
It is May 1st. Bye, everybody.
See y'all next Friday. Come with your questions.
Awesome.